She was just a waitress trying to get through her shift when a wealthy customer threw scalding coffee in her face over 3 spilled drops. The video went viral. What he didn't know, her husband was a retired crime boss who'd promised to leave violence behind. Now he had to choose between the man he used to be and the man he swore he'd become. The morning shift at Rosewood Cafe started like any other Tuesday. Sophie Leone balanced 3 plates of Eggs Benedict on her left arm while refilling coffee with her right hand, a skill perfected over 8 years of waitressing. The breakfast crowd hummed with the usual symphony of clinking silverware and muffled conversations. She loved this job, despite the aching feet and modest tips. It kept her grounded, normal, far away from the world her husband had left behind. "More coffee, sweetheart?" Sophie smiled at the elderly woman in booth 7, the regular who always ordered decaf and left exactly 15%. "You're an angel, dear." If only she knew, Sophie thought, suppressing a smile. The wife of Dominic Leone, once the most feared name in the city's underworld, was nobody's angel. But that life was over. Dominic had promised her. No more blood. No more fear. Just a quiet life running his legitimate real estate investments while she served breakfast to strangers. The door chimed. Sophie glanced up. Victor Hale strutted in like he owned the place. Probably because he did, or at least he owned the building and 47 others in the downtown district. She recognized him from the newspaper. Slick back hair, a suit that cost more than her monthly rent, and that particular brand of arrogance that money couldn't buy but seemed to attract anyway. He snapped his fingers at her from across the room. Sophie's jaw tightened, but she kept her smile plastered on. "Be right with you, sir." She finished topping off Mrs. Henderson's decaf and made her way to the corner booth where Hale had thrown himself into the seat, already barking into his phone. "I don't care if the permits aren't ready. I want those tenants out by Friday. Offer them pennies. If they don't take it, we'll find another way." He didn't look up as Sophie approached. "Coffee. Black. And make it quick. I have actual important people to meet." Sophie bit the inside of her cheek. "Of course, sir." She returned with the pot, the dark liquid steaming. As she leaned in to pour, Hale jerked his arm up to check his Rolex, smacking directly into her wrist. The coffee sloshed, just 3 drops, onto the pristine white cuff of his shirt. Time stopped. Hale's face went crimson. He shot to his feet, towering over her. "You incompetent idiot. Do you have any idea what this shirt costs?" "Sir, I'm so sorry. You moved your arm and I moved." His voice boomed through the cafe. Every conversation died. Every head turned. "You're blaming me for your clumsiness." Sophie's heart hammered. She could feel 40 pairs of eyes burning into her back. "No, sir, I didn't mean. Let me get you a towel. I'll pay for the cleaning." "Pay for it." Hale laughed, cold and sharp. "You couldn't afford the thread in this cuff." He snatched the coffee pot from her hands. Sophie saw it happening in slow motion but couldn't move fast enough. Hale raised the pot high and tilted it forward, sending a cascade of scalding cappuccino directly into her face. The world became white-hot agony. Sophie screamed, a raw, animalistic sound she didn't recognize as her own. The liquid fire ate through her skin, melting away everything but pain. She crumpled to her knees, hands covering her face, feeling the blisters already rising on her cheek, her jaw, the delicate skin near her eye. Somewhere far away, people were shouting. Phones appeared, recording. Someone yelled for ice. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard Hale's voice, casual as if discussing the weather. "Maybe next time you'll be more careful." The cafe manager rushed over, helping Sophie to her feet. She stumbled toward the back room, half-blind, her face screaming. In the doorway, she caught a glimpse of herself in the reflective surface of the industrial refrigerator. The right side of her face was angry red, already swelling, skin peeling in places. She looked like something from a nightmare. Sophie collapsed onto a storage crate and sobbed. Not just from the pain, though that was unbearable, but from the humiliation, the cruelty. She'd spent years serving people with a smile, treating everyone with dignity, and this was what she got. 3 drops of coffee, and her face might never be the same. Maria, the line cook, rushed in with a bag of ice wrapped in a towel. "Honey, oh my God. We're calling an ambulance." "No," Sophie managed through gritted teeth.
"No hospitals. Just."
"Give me a minute." She couldn't go to a hospital. Hospitals meant questions. Questions meant police reports. Police reports meant Dominic would find out. And if Dominic found out,
No.
she could handle this. She had to. 30 minutes later, Sophie slipped out the back door, her face wrapped in gauze, dark sunglasses hiding the worst of it. The manager had insisted she go home, had promised to handle everything. She'd nodded, mute, and left. She didn't see the teenage dishwasher in the alley, uploading the video he'd shot through the kitchen window to TikTok with the caption, "Rich Psycho Attacks Waitress at Rosewood Cafe." This is crazy. She didn't see it get 17 shares in the first minute. By the time Sophie reached her car, it had been shared 2,000 times. By the time she pulled into the underground garage of the luxury penthouse she shared with Dominic, it was going viral. And by the time she stepped into the elevator, carefully holding her face, trying to prepare a lie that would satisfy her husband, someone who'd built an empire on reading lies, the video had been viewed by 300,000 people, including someone who worked for Dominic Leone. Sophie pressed the button for the penthouse, watching the numbers climb. 10th floor, 15th, 20th. She had no idea that the man waiting for her upstairs was about to watch his entire world shift on its axis. That the promise he'd made to leave violence behind was about to be tested in ways neither of them could imagine. All because of 3 drops of coffee and one arrogant man who'd made the fatal mistake of hurting the only thing Dominic Leone loved more than power. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. Sophie stepped into her home, desperately hoping she could keep 2 worlds from colliding. She was already too late. Sophie stood in the marble bathroom, staring at her reflection under the harsh vanity lights. The right side of her face looked worse now, angry red welts spreading from her cheekbone to her jaw, some areas already darkening to purple. Her eye was swelling shut. She opened the medicine cabinet with trembling hands. Concealer, foundation, powder, the expensive stuff she rarely wore. Tonight, she'd need all of it. "Sophie." Dominic's voice carried from the living room. "You home, baby?" Her heart lurched.
"Yeah, just."
Freshening up. Long shift. She worked quickly, dabbing foundation over the burns. Every touch sent lightning bolts of pain through her face, but she gritted her teeth and kept going. Layer after layer. The swelling she couldn't hide, but maybe she could pass it off as an allergic reaction.
Or a fall.
Anything but the truth. Because the truth meant Dominic would ask questions. And questions would lead to names. And names would lead to. She didn't want to think about what came after that. Her husband had been out of the life for 3 years. 3 peaceful years of Sunday brunches and charity galas, and pretending the blood under his manicured nails had washed away. She wouldn't be the one to drag him back. Sophie pulled on a silk scarf, draping it artfully to obscure the right side of her face. She added oversized sunglasses even though they were indoors. Ridiculous, but it bought her time. She found Dominic in his study, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed contracts. At 42, he still had the build of a man who'd grown up fighting, broad shoulders, scarred knuckles he hid with expensive watches. But his eyes had softened since they married. She'd done that, given him a reason to want peace. He looked up and smiled, then frowned. "Why are you wearing sunglasses inside?" "Migraine," she said quickly. The fluorescent lights at the cafe were brutal today. Dominic set down his pen, studying her. She could feel his gaze like a physical weight, the same scrutiny he'd once used to spot liars across negotiation tables. "Come here." Sophie's pulse quickened, but she crossed to him, letting him pull her onto his lap. He reached for the sunglasses. "Don't," she said, catching his wrist. Really, the light hurts. Sophie, his voice dropped to that particular tone, gentle but immovable. What happened? Nothing. I told you. Your hand is shaking. You never shake. He carefully removed the sunglasses, and she watched his expression shift from concern to confusion to something darker. What the hell happened to your face? It's nothing. Just an accident at work. A customer. Her voice cracked despite her best efforts. He moved suddenly, and I spilled coffee on him, and he got angry and… And what? Dominic's jaw clenched. Did someone hit you?
No.
No, it was just she couldn't say it. Couldn't put words to the humiliation. It was an accident. Dominic's fingers traced the air near her burns, careful not to touch. These are second-degree burns, Sophie. This wasn't an accident. Tell me exactly what happened. I already did. Please, Dom, just let it go.
I'm fine.
You're not fine. You're lying to me, he stood abruptly, setting her on her feet, and paced to the window. In 12 years together, you've never lied to me. Not once. So, either you start telling the truth, or I'll make one phone call and have the whole story in 10 minutes. Sophie's stomach dropped. You promised.
No more of that.
You promised me. And you promised we'd always be honest. He turned back to her, and she saw it, the old Dominic flickering behind his eyes. The one who'd built an empire on fear and loyalty. Was it a customer? Yes. Did they do this deliberately? Sophie hesitated a second too long. Jesus Christ, Dominic pulled out his phone. Dom, don't. But he was already dialing.
Marco.
I need you to pull security footage from Rosewood Cafe. Today's morning shift, he paused, listening. I don't care if you have to hack it. 10 minutes. He hung up and looked at her, really looked at her, and Sophie saw something break in his expression. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, careful of her injuries. I'm sorry, he whispered into her hair. I'm sorry I wasn't there. You couldn't have been. It's not your fault. Then whose fault is it? Before she could answer, his phone buzzed. Then again. And again. Text after text lighting up the screen. Dominic pulled it out, frowning. Marco says. He doesn't need to hack anything. He tapped the screen, and Sophie watched his face go absolutely still. The kind of still that preceded hurricanes.
Dom?
He turned the phone toward her. The video was playing, grainy but clear enough. Victor Hale grabbing the coffee pot. Sophie's scream. The casual cruelty in Hale's voice as he walked away. The video had 7 million views. That's Victor Hale, Dominic said quietly. Too quietly. Real estate developer. Worth about 300 million. Owns half the commercial district. He looked up at her, and she barely recognized the ice in his eyes. He burned my wife. Dominic, please.
I'm okay.
Well, just. You're not okay. Look at yourself. He gestured to her face, his hand shaking now too. And that son of a bitch just walked away. Like you were nothing. I am nothing. To him, I mean. I'm just a waitress he'll never think about again. Sophie grabbed his arm. That's how it should stay. We have a good life. A safe life. Don't throw it away over this. Dominic's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, and something shifted in his expression. Marco traced Hale's schedule. He's at Morton Steakhouse right now. Celebrating some deal.
Dom.
I could be there in 20 minutes. He wasn't talking to her anymore, just thinking out loud. Walk in, put 2 in his chest, 1 in his head.
Classic.
Efficient. And then what? Sophie's voice rose. You go to prison? We lose everything? Your daughter loses her father? That stopped him. Their daughter Isabella, 17, and starting to look at colleges. The whole reason he'd left the life in the first place. Dominic set his phone down carefully, like it might explode. You're right. You're right. He ran both hands through his hair. Seeing you hurt like this, knowing some entitled piece of garbage did it and won't face any consequences. There are other consequences besides bullets. He looked at her sharply. What do you mean? You're a legitimate businessman now, remember? You have resources, lawyers, connections. Maybe she hated herself for saying it, for opening this door. Maybe there's a middle ground. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone again and made a different call.
Rico.
I need a full background check on Victor Hale. Everything. Financial records, business dealings, personal life. Everything that isn't nailed down, he paused. Because he hurt Sophie. And I need to know exactly who I'm dealing with before I decide what happens next. He hung up and pulled Sophie close again, pressing his lips to her forehead. I won't kill him. I promise you that. But I can't let this go. I won't. Sophie nodded against his chest, relief and dread mixing in her stomach. She'd stopped him from immediate violence. But she'd also just unleashed something potentially worse. Dominic Leone was going to war. He just planned to win without firing a shot. Dawn broke over the city, painting the skyline in shades of amber and gold. Dominic hadn't slept. He'd spent the night in his office, surrounded by printouts and laptop screens, building a profile on Victor Hale that would make the FBI jealous. Rico Alvarez arrived at 6 a.m. sharp, carrying 2 espressos and a manila folder thick enough to stop a bullet. Boss, Rico set the folder on the desk. At 55, he'd been Dominic's consigliere since the beginning, the only man who'd followed him from the bloody streets to the boardroom. His loyalty was absolute, which made him dangerous when pointed in the wrong direction. Everything you asked for. Dominic flipped open the folder. Bank statements, property records, business partnerships, mistresses, traffic violations. The man's entire life, dissected and laid bare. Victor Hale, Rico began, settling into the leather chair across from Dominic. 48 years old. Inherited his father's construction company at 25, turned it into a real estate empire. Currently worth $320 million, give or take. Owns commercial properties in 6 states. Reputation for being, let's say, ruthless in his business dealings. Ruthless, Dominic's finger traced a scar on Victor's financial timeline. That's a polite word for it. He's got enemies. Lots of them. Tenants he's evicted, contractors he's stiffed, business partners he's screwed. Rico leaned forward. Which is why this should be easy. One call, Dom. I can have him in pieces by noon. Make it look like any one of 50 people who want him dead.
No.
Boss. I said no. Dominic closed the folder. Sophie made me promise.
No bullets.
No blood. Rico's jaw tightened. With respect, this ain't about promises. That bastard burned your wife's face off in front of a room full of people. He humiliated her. You let that slide, people start thinking you've gone soft. Let them think it.
Dom Rico stood, passing.
You know I followed you out of the life. I'm running legitimate operations now. Imports, exports, all clean. But this is different. This is personal. The old rules should apply. The old rules got 32 of our guys killed over stupid pride. Dominic's voice went cold. I'm not that man anymore. Then what man are you? Dominic looked up, and Rico actually took a step back. Because the expression on his boss's face wasn't the gentle businessman who attended charity galas. It was something else entirely. Something calculating and patient and infinitely more frightening than rage. I'm the man who's going to destroy Victor Hale without laying a finger on him. Rico sat back down slowly.
I'm listening.
Dominic spread out the financial documents. Hale's empire looks solid, but it's built on leverage. He's got loans from 7 different banks, all secured against properties he's overvalued. He's also cutting corners, using substandard materials, bribing inspectors, violating safety codes. The man's a walking Rico violation, except he's too rich for anyone to look closely. So, we make them look. Exactly. Dominic pulled out a yellow legal pad covered in notes. We start with his stock. Hale Development Corporation is publicly traded. Not huge, but stable. That stability is based on investor confidence. So we shake that confidence. Rico's eyes lit up with understanding. Anonymous tips. Better than tips. Facts. Dominic tapped the folder. Hale's been cooking his books for years. Inflating property values, hiding debts in shell companies, reporting phantom profits. It's all here. We just need to put it somewhere people will see it. I know a few financial journalists who owe us favors. Not us. That connection can't exist. Dominic pulled out his phone and typed something. But I know a whistleblower network that specializes in corporate fraud. They verify everything before publishing. Give them this evidence anonymously, they'll do the rest. Rico grinned, the predatory smile of a man who'd spent decades hunting. His stock crashes, investors panic, banks start calling in loans. Like dominoes, Dominic stood, moving to the window. The city was waking up below, millions of people starting their days with no idea that in this room, a man's fate was being sealed. But we don't stop there. The cafe video has 7 million views and counting. Public sympathy is with Sophie. We feed that.
How?
Hale thinks he's untouchable because he's rich. So we show people he's not. Dominic turned back. We find every tenant he's screwed, every contractor he's cheated, every employee he's abused. We give them a platform. Social media, news outlets, everywhere. We turn him into a symbol of everything people hate about entitled wealth. Rico nodded slowly, impressed despite himself. Public opinion destroys his reputation while the financial hits destroy his empire. 2-front war. 3-front, Dominic returned to his desk. Hale's got political connections, city councilmen, the mayor, planning commissioners. All bought and paid for. Those connections protect him from investigations. But connections run on money and reputation. When both disappear, the rats jump ship. And suddenly, all those bribes and backroom deals become liabilities. People start talking to save themselves. Dominic picked up a pen. We don't need to touch him, Rico. We just need to remove everything protecting him and let the system he corrupted eat him alive. Rico sat back, shaking his head with something like wonder. This is why you were the boss. You think 10 moves ahead. 12 actually. Dominic allowed himself a small smile. But we need to move fast. Hale's not stupid. Once the financial hits start, he'll lawyer up, circle the wagons. We need everything hitting simultaneously. Too many fires for him to put out. I'll need manpower. Coordination. Use Marco, Vincent, and Teresa. Nobody else. The fewer people involved, the less chance of this getting back to us. Dominic's expression hardened. And Rico? This has to look like bad luck. A natural collapse. If anyone suspects outside interference. I know. We lose the moral high ground, and Sophie kills us both. Rico stood. When do we start? You started 40 minutes ago. Check your email. Rico pulled out his phone, scrolling through. His eyebrows rose. You already sent the documents to the whistleblower network. At 5:30 this morning. They've verified authenticity and are preparing their exposé. It drops at noon. Dominic checked his watch. In 6 hours, Victor Hale's stock will be in free fall. By tonight, his world starts burning. Rico laughed, sharp and genuine. You really haven't gone soft. You just got smarter. Not smarter. Just older. Dominic thought of Sophie, probably still asleep upstairs, her face bandaged. And I have more to lose now. What about Sophie? She know what you're doing. She knows I'm doing something. She doesn't need the details. Dominic walked Rico to the door. Keep me updated every 2 hours. I want to know the second anything moves. Rico paused at the threshold. Boss? For what it's worth. That bastard deserves everything coming to him. I know. But this isn't about what he deserves. Dominic's voice went quiet. It's about making sure he never hurts anyone else the way he hurt her. After Rico left, Dominic returned to the window. The city sprawled before him, indifferent and eternal. Somewhere out there, Victor Hale was probably having breakfast, completely unaware that his empire was about to crumble.
No bullets.
No blood. Just consequences. Dominic picked up his phone and pulled up the cafe video one more time. Watched his wife scream. Watched her fall. Watched Victor Hale walk away like she was nothing. He deleted the video and made one more call. Detective Cole? This is Dominic Leone. I believe we need to talk about Victor Hale. Sometimes the best revenge was simply telling the truth. Victor Hale's morning started perfectly. His barber had given him the sharpest fade in the city, his tailor had delivered 3 new suits, and his mistress had texted him something deliciously inappropriate. By 11 a.m., he was in his corner office on the 42nd floor, feet on his mahogany desk, watching his stock ticker climb. Life was good when you were untouchable. His assistant and buzzed in. "Mr. Hale? Your broker is on line 1. He says it's urgent." Victor waved dismissively. "Tell him I'm in a meeting."
He said you'd want to take this.
"Something about your stock." Frowning, Victor picked up. "Gary, this better be good. I've got the Riverside deal closing in an hour." "Victor, we have a problem." Gary's voice was tight. "HDC stock is dropping."
Fast.
"How fast?" 15% in the last 30 minutes. Victor's feet hit the floor.
What?
"That's impossible." "What happened?" "Some financial website called Clean Slate published an exposé. They're claiming accounting irregularities, inflated property values, hidden debts." "Victor, they have documents. Bank statements. Internal memos. Someone leaked everything." The blood drained from Victor's face. "That's insane. We're clean." "Are you?" Gary's voice carried an edge. "Because these documents look pretty damning." "Victor, my firm can't be associated with." "Don't you dare." Victor stood, gripping the phone. "You've been my broker for 12 years. You're not jumping ship over some internet gossip." "It's not gossip. Reuters just picked it up. So did Bloomberg." "Victor, I have to think about my other clients. I'm liquidating your positions." "You can't." The line went dead. Victor threw his phone across the room, watching it shatter against the wall. His intercom buzzed again. "What?" he snarled. "Mr. Chin from First National Bank is here. He doesn't have an appointment, but he insists. Send him in." Marcus Chin entered looking like a man at a funeral. He was usually all smiles and golf stories. Today, he carried a briefcase and the expression of an executioner. "Victor, we need to discuss your loans." "Marcus, whatever you've heard." "I've heard that your company has been systematically defrauding investors." Marcus set his briefcase on the desk and pulled out documents. "The board held an emergency meeting this morning. They want your loans called in immediately." Victor's vision tunneled. "You can't call in $60 million of loans on a day's notice." "We can when the collateral is suddenly questionable." Marcus's voice was cold. "Professional. According to this exposé, the property values you use to secure these loans are inflated by an average of 40%. That makes the bank's position untenable. This is a hit job. Someone's trying to destroy me." "Then I suggest you hire lawyers." Marcus stood. "You have 72 hours to make arrangements. After that, we begin seizure proceedings." He left Victor standing there, the walls closing in. By noon, HDC stock had lost 32% of its value. By 1 p.m., 3 more banks had called demanding meetings. By 2 p.m., the cafe video had resurfaced, not just the original, but edited versions with captions like, "This is who you're defending," and "Billionaire assaults waitress, faces 0 consequences." Victor watched the social media storm from his office, drink in hand. His Twitter mentions were a tsunami of rage. Someone had created a hashtag. #Justice for Sophie. It was trending nationally.
His phone rang.
His publicist. "Victor, we need damage control."
Now.
"I'm working on it." "No, you're drinking." "I can hear the ice cubes," she sighed. "Listen, the story's gotten bigger. People are digging into your past. They found the Greenwood Towers incident." Victor's blood went cold. That was settled. Sealed records. Someone unsealed them. It's on Twitter. The whistleblower who died in that construction accident? People are calling it murder. It was investigated. I was cleared. By inspectors you were paying off. "Victor, those payment records just leaked too." Her voice dropped. "I can't help you anymore. My firm can't be associated with this."
"I'm sorry."
She hung up. Victor poured another drink with shaking hands. This wasn't random. This was coordinated. Orchestrated. But by whom? His mind flashed to the cafe. The waitress. Those terrified eyes before he'd thrown the coffee. What was her name? Sophie something.
No. Impossible.
She was nobody. A minimum wage server with no connections, no power. This level of destruction required resources. Money. Influence. His intercom buzzed for the 10th time that hour. Mr. Hale, there are reporters in the lobby. They're asking about Sophie Leone and… Leone? Victor's head snapped up. Did you say Leone? Yes, sir.
Sophie Leone.
The waitress from the video. The glass slipped from Victor's fingers, shattering on the marble floor.
Leone. No. No, no, no.
He grabbed his laptop, fingers flying across the keys.
Sophie Leone.
Search. His stomach dropped through the floor. Married to Dominic Leone. Wife of 6 years. 1 daughter. Dominic Leone. Real estate investor. Former. Oh God, the words escaped as a whisper. Former mob boss. Retired 3 years ago. Suspected in 17 murders. Never charged. Known for being patient, methodical, and absolutely ruthless to anyone who threatened his family. Victor had thrown coffee in the face of a mob boss's wife. On camera. In front of millions of people. His desk phone rang. Unknown number. With trembling hands, he answered. Hello, Victor, the voice was calm. Almost friendly. We haven't been properly introduced. My name is Dominic Leone. Victor couldn't breathe. I want you to know something, Dominic continued. I promised my wife I wouldn't kill you. And I'm a man who keeps his promises. But I never said I wouldn't destroy you. Please, I didn't know. You didn't know she was my wife? Or you didn't know she was a human being who deserved basic respect? The friendliness evaporated. Which part of throwing scalding coffee in someone's face seemed acceptable to you, Victor? I'll apologize.
Publicly.
I'll pay for medical bills, therapy, whatever she needs. She doesn't need your money. And your apology is worth exactly as much as you thought her pain was worth. Nothing. A pause. Your stock is down 41% now, by the way. Just checked. You're doing this. All of it. Me? I'm just a businessman, Victor. I'm simply ensuring that certain truths come to light. Truths about inflated property values, bribed officials, safety violations that killed workers. You built an empire on lies and cruelty. I'm just removing the foundation. Victor's voice cracked. I'll lose everything.
Good.
Maybe then you'll understand what it feels like to be powerless. To be at someone else's mercy. Dominic's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. My wife tried to hide what you did for me. She was protecting you, though God knows you don't deserve it. She's a better person than both of us combined. And you burned her face because she spilled 3 drops of coffee.
I'm sorry.
Tell it to the prosecutors. Oh, did I mention? I had an interesting conversation with Detective Marissa Cole this morning. Turns out she's very interested in reopening the investigation into that worker's death at Greenwood Towers. And several other incidents. Funny how evidence has a way of surfacing when people actually bother to look. The line went dead. Victor sat in his destroyed office as his empire crumbled around him. Outside his window, the city continued on, indifferent to his fall. He'd thought himself untouchable. He'd learned, too late, that everyone burns eventually. Some by coffee. Some by consequence. Sophie returned to work 3 days after the incident. Her manager had begged her to take more time, but staying home meant watching Dominic pace and take mysterious phone calls. At least at the cafe, she could pretend everything was normal. Except nothing was normal anymore. Your usual table is ready, Mrs. Leone, the hostess, who'd never called her anything but Sophie in 8 years, practically bowed. At the counter, a businessman slid a $50 bill under his coffee cup. For you. What that guy did was unforgivable. An elderly woman touched Sophie's arm gently. You're so brave, dear. My granddaughter shared your video. You've become quite the symbol. Sophie smiled weakly and retreated to the kitchen. Maria cornered her immediately. Girl, have you seen the news? That Hale guy is finished. His company stock crashed, Banks are calling his loans, and apparently there's some scandal about a worker who died at one of his construction sites. Maria's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Karma's real. Yeah, Sophie whispered. Karma. But it wasn't karma. It was Dominic. She knew it in her bones. Even though he swore he was just letting the truth surface, the timing was too perfect. The destruction too complete. She'd wanted justice. But watching a man's life implode on every news channel felt less like justice and more like execution. Her shift ended at 3. She drove home in silence, practicing the conversation she needed to have with Dominic.
They had to stop this.
Whatever this was. She pulled into the garage and froze. Isabella's car was already there. Her daughter was supposed to be at debate practice until 5. Sophie hurried inside and heard voices from Dominic's study, low and intense. She crept closer. Don't understand what you're asking me to do. That was Marco, one of Dominic's men. I'm not asking Dominic's voice. The Hale job needs to accelerate. His political connections are starting to mobilize. I want every dirty deal exposed by tomorrow. Boss, the guys are wondering if maybe we're pushing too hard, going too visible. The guys don't need to wonder. They need to execute. Sophie's heart sank. She turned to leave and nearly collided with Isabella. Her daughter stood in the hallway, backpack sliding off her shoulder, eyes wide with betrayal. Izzy. Isabella pushed past her and burst into the study. What's the Hale job? Dominic looked up, his expression shifting instantly from cold commander to concerned father. Sweetheart, you're home early. Debate was cancelled. Answer my question. Isabella's voice shook. I heard you. Marco said the Hale job, that's the guy who hurt Mom, right? Marco glanced at Dominic, who nodded toward the door. Give us a minute. After Marco left, Dominic stood and moved toward Isabella. Baby, this doesn't concern you. Don't, she stepped back. Don't treat me like I'm stupid. I've been watching the news. Victor Hale's entire life is collapsing. His company, his reputation, everything. And it all started the day after he hurt Mom, her eyes filled with tears. You're doing this. You're destroying him. He destroyed himself, Dominic said quietly. I'm just making sure everyone sees it. That's not how this works. Isabella's voice cracked. You promised. 3 years ago, when we moved here, when you said we could have a normal life, you promised the old days were over. No more crime. No more violence. No more being afraid every time you left the house. Sophie moved to her daughter's side. Izzy, your father isn't. Isn't what? Isn't ruining someone's life?
I saw the video, Mom.
What he did was horrible. But this? Isabella gestured wildly. Dad's not calling in the police or filing lawsuits. He's using his old connections to systematically destroy this guy. That's not justice. That's revenge. It's both, Dominic said, his voice harder now. No, it's not. Justice is supposed to be fair, measured. This is. Isabella's face crumpled. You're turning back into what you were. The words hit Dominic like a physical blow. Sophie watched her husband's face, saw the flash of pain. Isabella Leone, that's enough, Sophie said firmly. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, Dad's proving that he never really changed. He just found better ways to hurt people. Isabella wiped her eyes angrily. What happens when I'm at college and some guy is rude to me? You gonna destroy his life too? What about when I have a bad boss or a mean neighbor or someone who just pisses me off? Where does it end? This is different, Dominic started.
How?
Because it's personal. Isabella's laugh was bitter. Everything's personal to you, Dad. That's the problem. You see the world as people who are with you and people who need to be eliminated. That man threw scalding coffee in your mother's face, Dominic said, his voice rising. In front of a room full of people. He humiliated her, hurt her, and he walked away laughing. You want me to just let that go? I want you to let the police handle it. I want you to be the man you promised you'd become, not the man you used to be. Isabella's tears flowed freely now.
I'm 17, Dad.
In 8 months, I'm going to college. I've been lying to my friends for 3 years about what you used to do. Making up stories about your import-export business and your real estate investments. Do you know how that feels? To be ashamed of your own father? The silence that followed was devastating. Sophie reached for her daughter, but Isabella pulled away. I have homework. She ran upstairs. A door slammed. Dominic stood motionless, staring at the space where his daughter had been. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible.
She's ashamed of me.
Sophie moved to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. She's 17 and scared. She doesn't understand. No, Dominic pulled back, his eyes haunted. She understands perfectly. She sees exactly what I am. What I've always been. He walked to the window, shoulders tense. Maybe she's right. Maybe I haven't changed at all. You have changed. This isn't about going back to violence. Isn't it? He turned to face her. I'm destroying a man's life, Sophie. Methodically. Efficiently. Without remorse. That's exactly what the old Dominic would have done. I just traded bullets for bankruptcy. That man hurt me. And I couldn't protect you. I wasn't there when it happened. I can't undo it. So I'm doing the only thing I know how to do, his voice cracked. I'm making him pay. Because if I don't, then what good am I? What's the point of all this power, all these connections, if I can't protect my own family? Sophie cupped his face in her hands. The point is to be better. To show Isabella that there's another way. What if there isn't? What if this is just who I am? Before Sophie could answer, her phone buzzed. A news alert. Breaking. Victor Hale arrested on fraud charges. Investigation expands to include manslaughter in 2019 construction death. Dominic's phone buzzed with the same alert. He looked at it, then at Sophie, and something shifted in his expression. It's done, he said flatly. He's finished. So stop, Sophie pleaded. Whatever else you have planned, stop. You've made your point. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone and dialed.
Rico.
Call off the rest. Everything stops now, he listened to the response. I don't care what's already in motion. Stop it. We're done. He hung up and looked at Sophie. I can stop the operation. But I can't undo what Isabella saw today. What she thinks of me now. Then show her who you really are, Sophie said softly. Not through destruction. Through building something better. Upstairs, behind her closed door, Isabella sat with her laptop, reading every article about Victor Hale's arrest. She wanted to feel relieved, vindicated. Instead, she just felt sick. Her father had won, but at what cost? She pulled up her college acceptance letters, Stanford, Columbia, Yale. All far from home, all offering escape from the shadows of her father's past. Maybe distance was the only way to find out who she was without his darkness hanging over her. She heard footsteps outside her door. A soft knock. Izzy. Her father's voice, small and uncertain. Can we talk? Isabella stared at the door, torn between love and fear. Not tonight, Dad, she finally said. I need time. The footsteps retreated. Isabella returned to her laptop, highlighting Yale's acceptance letter. 3,000 miles suddenly didn't seem far enough. Detective Marissa Cole had spent 15 years in organized crime, and she knew a pattern when she saw one. She sat in her cubicle at police headquarters, surrounded by printouts and sticky notes, building a timeline. Victor Hale burns Sophie Leon's face on Tuesday morning. By Tuesday evening, financial whistleblowers release damning documents. By Wednesday, Hale's stock crashes. By Thursday, his political allies abandon him. By Friday, he's arrested. 5 days from assault to complete destruction. Too fast. Too coordinated. Too perfect. Her partner, Detective James Reeves, rolled his chair over with coffee. You're still on the Hale thing? Let it go, Mari. The guy got what he deserved. That's not how justice works, and you know it. She tapped her pen against the timeline. This level of coordinated attack requires resources. Planning. Access to sealed financial records and political connections. So, Maybe the universe finally delivered some karma. The universe doesn't have a black Mercedes S-Class registered to Leone Enterprises. She pulled out a grainy photo from the cafe footage, a reflection in the window showing a car parked across the street. This was there 20 minutes after the incident. Gone 30 minutes later. James squinted at the image. Could be anyone's car. Could be. Except Leone Enterprises owns a fleet of identical vehicles. And Leone Enterprises is owned by Dominic Leone. She pulled up his file on her computer. Former head of the Leone crime family. Suspected in 17 murders. Ran everything from loan sharking to protection rackets. Then 3 years ago he just
stopped.
Went legitimate. Or claimed to. What's that got to do with Hale? Sophie Leone is his wife. Marissa watched James's expression change. The waitress in the video? She's married to one of the most dangerous men who ever operated in this city. James whistled low, and Hale threw coffee in her face, on camera, in front of witnesses. The video went viral immediately. Marissa stood, pacing. 6 hours later, Dominic Leone called me personally. Said he had information about Victor Hale's criminal activities. Wanted to cooperate with our investigation. We didn't have an investigation.
Exactly.
But after his call, I started looking. And suddenly, evidence was everywhere.
Anonymous tips.
Leaked documents. Whistleblowers coming out of the woodwork. It's like someone built us a prosecution case and left it on our doorstep with a bow. James frowned. You think Leone orchestrated Hale's downfall? I think Leone made it very easy for Hale to destroy himself. Marissa returned to her desk, pulling out more files. Look at this. Every piece of evidence we have is legitimate. Real financial fraud. Actual safety violations.
Genuine corruption.
Leone didn't manufacture anything. He just made sure we found it. So, what's the crime? Helping us do our job. The crime is that a known former mobster had the means and motive to systematically dismantle a civilian's life in less than a week. Even if technically legal, that's a level of power that concerns me. She pulled out another photo, Dominic leaving a restaurant with 2 men she recognized from his old organization. And he's still meeting with his former associates. Rico Alvarez, his old consigliera. Marco Santini, former enforcer. These guys didn't become legitimate businessmen. They just got better at hiding. James leaned back. What do you want to do? I want to talk to Dominic Leone. On the record, she grabbed her jacket. He thinks he's untouchable because he didn't break any laws. I want him to understand that I'm watching. Mari, be careful. Leone's not someone you want as an enemy. Then he shouldn't have called me first. Dominic's office building stood downtown. All glass and steel, the kind of legitimate wealth that old money built and new money envied. Marissa showed her badge at security and was escorted to the 45th floor. The receptionist, a polished woman in her 30s, smiled professionally. Detective Cole? Mr. Leone is expecting you. Right this way. That surprised her. She hadn't called ahead. Dominic's office was tastefully decorated. Modern art, leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The man himself stood by those windows, hands in his pockets, looking every inch the successful businessman. Detective Cole, he turned, offering his hand. Thank you for coming.
She didn't take it.
You knew I was coming. Security called when you entered the building. He gestured to a chair. Please sit. Marissa remained standing. I'm here about Victor Hale. I assumed. Coffee. No. Thank you, she pulled out her notebook. You called me 5 days ago with information about Mr. Hale's criminal activities. Information that led to his arrest. Is that a question? Where did you get that information? Dominic smiled slightly. I'm a businessman, detective. Due diligence is part of what I do. When someone attacks my wife, I like to know who I'm dealing with. Due diligence doesn't usually include sealed financial records and testimony from anonymous whistleblowers who appeared out of nowhere. I made some calls. Asked some questions. People talk when you know how to listen. He moved to his desk, leaning against it. Is there a problem? I thought you'd be pleased. A dangerous man is off the streets. I'm pleased a criminal was arrested. I'm less pleased about how it happened. Marissa stepped closer. In 5 days, Victor Hale lost everything. His company collapsed, his political allies abandoned him, his entire empire imploded. That doesn't happen naturally, Mr. Leone. That happens when someone very powerful decides to make it happen. Or when someone very corrupt finally faces consequences. Dominic's expression didn't change. You've seen the evidence, Detective. Every charge against Hale is legitimate. He defrauded investors, bribed officials, covered up a worker's death. I didn't create those crimes. I simply made sure they came to light, using resources and connections from your old life. Using my phone and the internet, he pulled out his cell phone, setting it on the desk. I made calls to journalists, financial analysts, and your department. All perfectly legal. If that makes me powerful, then I guess I'm guilty of being thorough. Marissa studied him. He was good, calm, controlled, giving her nothing. But she'd interrogated enough criminals to read the subtext. Let me be clear, Mr. Leone. I know what you used to be. I know the kind of organization you ran. And I know that men like you don't just walk away from that life. Men like me? For the first time, something sharp entered his voice. What kind of man am I, Detective? The kind who solves problems with force. Who sees the world in terms of loyalty and betrayal. Who doesn't hesitate to destroy anyone who threatens what's his. Dominic was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer. You're right about one thing. I don't hesitate to protect my family. My wife had second-degree burns on her face because a man with too much money and too little humanity decided her pain didn't matter. If making sure he faced justice for that and for all his other crimes makes me a bad man in your eyes, I can live with that. Justice? Or revenge? Can it be both? He pushed off the desk. You want to know if I orchestrated Hale's downfall?
Yes.
I made calls, connected dots, made sure the right people saw the right information. But I didn't plant evidence. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't break a single law. I just told the truth louder than Hale's money could silence it. Marissa felt her certainty wavering. She'd come here expecting a clear villain. Instead, she found a man who'd weaponized the system against someone who'd abused it. The surveillance, she said finally. The car outside the cafe right after the incident. Mine, Dominic admitted. I have a security detail that monitors threats. When my wife is working, someone's always nearby. They saw what happened, called me immediately. By the time I arrived, Sophie had already left. Convenient. Careful, he met her eyes. There's a difference between being prepared and being guilty. Marissa closed her notebook. I want to be clear about something, Mr. Leone. Just because what you did was legal doesn't make it right. You used your power and connections to systematically destroy a man's life. I exposed a criminal who'd been operating with impunity for years. Isn't that your job? My job is to uphold the law, not to bend it to serve personal vendettas. And my job is to protect my family. Dominic's voice went cold. You want to investigate me? Go ahead. You'll find nothing illegal. Nothing prosecutable. Just a man who made sure justice actually happened instead of waiting for a system that protects people like Victor Hale. Marissa headed for the door, then paused. Your daughter, Isabella. She's 17, right? Dominic's entire body tensed. Leave my daughter out of this. I'm just saying, kids watch what their parents do. They learn from it. You might want to think about what you're teaching her. She opened the door. Have a nice day, Mr. Leone. She left him standing there, and she knew she'd struck a nerve. Back in her car, Marissa sat for a moment, processing. Dominic Leone had done everything right and everything wrong simultaneously. He'd broken no laws but had demonstrated the kind of power that made her deeply uncomfortable. Her phone buzzed. James. Find anything? She typed back. He didn't break the law. He just bent fate. Because that was exactly what Dominic Leone had done. And the truly frightening part, there was nothing she could do about it. Rico Alvarez sat in the back booth of Salvatore's, a restaurant that had laundered money for 3 generations of organized crime families. Now it just served excellent pasta to oblivious tourists. Progress, Dominic called it. Rico called it surrender. Across from him sat Tommy Knuckles Martino, 47, built like a concrete block, with hands that had broken more bones than a car accident. Tommy had been muscle back in the old days. Now he drove a delivery truck for one of Dominic's legitimate businesses. "I don't get it," Tommy said, stabbing his ravioli. "We had Hale on the ropes. One more push and the guy would have eaten a bullet on his own. But Dom calls it off. Says we're done." "Boss is going soft," muttered Vincent Chen, nursing an espresso. He was younger, 32, and hadn't fully lived through the old days. But he remembered enough to be frustrated. "My uncle died in a mob war. You know what the other side did? They sent flowers and a check to my aunt. Respect.
Honor.
Now, we let some rich prick burn the boss's wife, and we what? File paperwork." Rico stayed quiet, swirling his wine. He'd been with Dominic for 30 years. Through wars, betrayals, federal investigations, and finally, retirement. He'd followed his boss into legitimacy because loyalty meant something. But loyalty worked both ways. "The detective visited today," Rico said finally. "Marissa Cole. From organized crime." Tommy's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. What did she want? To remind Dom that she's watching. That he might have stayed legal this time, but she knows what we are. Rico set down his glass. And you know what he did? He took it, sat there, and let her lecture him about power and consequences and his daughter. She brought up Isabella? Vincent's voice went hard. Used her to get under his skin. Said kids learn from their parents. Implied Dom was teaching her the wrong lessons. Rico's jaw clenched. In the old days, someone disrespects the boss like that? Talks about his family? There'd be consequences. So, what are you saying? Tommy leaned forward. We send a message to a cop? That's heat we don't need, Rico. I'm not talking about the cop. Rico pulled out his phone, sliding it across the table. On the screen was a photo of Victor Hale leaving county jail on bail, $50 million posted by some fancy law firm. I'm talking about finishing what we started. Vincent's eyes widened. Dom said to stop. Direct order. Dom said to stop the financial attacks. He didn't say anything about Hale staying healthy. Rico took the phone back. The guy walks in 3 days for arraignment. Lawyers are already spinning it, claiming he was set up, that the evidence is circumstantial, that he's a victim of corporate espionage. Let the lawyers talk, Tommy said. Judge and jury will see through it. Will they? Rico's voice dropped. Hale's got connections. Money.
Power.
You really think the system's gonna give him what he deserves? He'll get a slap on the wrist, maybe a year in minimum security, and he'll be right back where he started. Not our problem anymore, Vincent said, but he didn't sound convinced. It is our problem. Sophie's family. Dom's family. That makes them our family. Rico leaned in. I've been making calls. Quiet ones. There's a guy, works maintenance at the courthouse. Owes us from the old days. He can make sure Hale has an accident on those stairs. Head trauma. Tragic fall.
Clean.
Untraceable. Tommy and Vincent exchanged glances. Dom's trying to be something he's not, Rico continued. He thinks going legitimate means letting the system handle everything. But the system protects guys like Hale. It always has. We used to be the balance. When justice failed, we stepped in. That's not our call to make anymore, Vincent said quietly. Whose call is it then? The daughter who's ashamed of her old man? The wife who wants him to be someone he can never be? Rico's frustration boiled over. I've watched Dom tear himself apart trying to be legitimate. Trying to prove he's changed. But changing doesn't mean becoming weak. It doesn't mean letting predators walk free. If you do this, Tommy said carefully, and Dom finds out, he'll understand. Eventually Rico stood. Or he won't. Either way, Hale won't hurt anyone else ever again. He left cash on the table and walked out into the night. What Rico didn't see was the black SUV parked across the street, or Marco Santini in the driver's seat, phone pressed to his ear. Boss, we got a problem. Dominic arrived at the warehouse at midnight. The building was abandoned, officially. Unofficially, It served as neutral ground for conversations that couldn't happen in offices or restaurants. Rico's car was already there. Dominic walked in to find his consigliere checking his weapon, a Glock 19, suppressor already attached. On the table lay blueprints of the courthouse, guard schedules, and a photo of Victor Hale. "Put it down," Dominic said quietly. Rico looked up unsurprised. "Marco ratted me out. Marco's loyal to me. Not to whatever this is." Dominic moved closer. "What are you doing?" Finishing the job, Rico set the gun down but didn't step away from it. Hale made bail. His lawyers are already working on getting the charges reduced. In 6 months, he'll be back to business as usual. That's not your decision to make. Someone has to make it. You called off the operation, fine. But that doesn't mean justice is served. Rico's voice rose. "This guy burned Sophie's face, Dom. On camera. In front of the world. And you're just gonna let the court slap his wrist and send him home. I'm going to let the system work." The system doesn't work. Not for people like us, and damn sure not against people like him. Rico slammed his hand on the table.
You taught me that.
You spent 20 years building an empire because you understood that sometimes the only justice is the kind you make yourself. I was wrong. The words hung in the air like a confession. Rico stared at him. "What?" "I was wrong," Dominic repeated, stronger this time. "About justice. About power. About what it means to protect the people you love." He moved to the table, looking at the blueprints. "You want to kill Hale. I understand that.
Part of me wants it too.
But if you do this, we lose everything I've been trying to build. We built an empire. On blood and fear. And where did it get us?" Dominic's voice cracked. 12 of our guys dead before they hit 30. 3 in prison for life. Families destroyed. Kids growing up without fathers. And for what? So we could feel powerful? So we could pretend we were the good guys punishing the bad. We were the good guys. We protected our neighborhood. We were criminals, Rico. We hurt people.
Killed people.
And we told ourselves it was necessary, that we were different from the monsters we fought. But we weren't. Dominic picked up the gun, ejecting the magazine. "My daughter is ashamed of me. My wife is terrified I'll slip back into the man I used to be. And you know what? They're right to be scared. Because standing here looking at these blueprints, part of me wants to say yes.
Do it.
Put Hale in the ground where he belongs. Then why don't you?" "Because that part of me destroyed everyone I ever loved." Dominic set the gun down empty. "I'm trying to be better. Not for the world. Not for some moral high ground. For them. For Sophie and Isabella. Because they deserve a husband and father who doesn't solve problems with bullets." Rico's shoulders sagged. "I've been with you for 30 years, Dom. Through everything. I followed you out of the life because you asked me to. But this? Letting Hale walk. It feels wrong. It is wrong. The whole situation is wrong. But killing him won't make it right. It'll just make us murderers again." Dominic moved closer. "I need you to trust me. The way I've always trusted you. What if the system fails? What if Hale walks? Then I'll find another way. A legal way. But I won't drag us back into blood." Dominic put his hand on Rico's shoulder. "You're my brother. You've always had my back. But I'm asking you to stand down. Please." Rico looked at the gun, the blueprints, then back at Dominic. 30 years of loyalty, warring with 30 years of instinct. Finally, he nodded. "You're the boss." "No," Dominic squeezed his shoulder. "You're not following orders. You're choosing. There's a difference." Rico managed a weak smile. "When do you get so philosophical?" "Therapy." Sophie insisted. Dominic picked up the blueprints and ripped them in half. "But you're off this. All of it. Take a vacation. Go see your sister in Florida. When you come back, we're going to talk about your future with the organization." "You firing me?" "I'm asking you to decide if you can live in the world I'm trying to build. One where we solve problems without violence. Where we're actually legitimate." Dominic's voice softened. "I can't have people around me who'll go behind my back when they disagree with my choices. I need loyalty to the new path, not the old one." Rico was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. After Rico left, Dominic stood alone in the warehouse, surrounded by ghosts of who he used to be. He pulled out his phone and called Sophie. Hey, she answered sleepy. Everything okay?
Yeah, just handled something.
I'm coming home.
Dumb.
Whatever it was, I'm proud of you. He smiled despite the weight in his chest. How do you know? Because you sound like you made the hard choice. That's who you are now. Dominic looked at the torn blueprints on the floor. I hope you're right. He left the warehouse, locking the door behind him. Some wars were won with restraint. He just hoped it was enough. Dominic couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m., he sat in his study with a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched, staring at the city lights. The confrontation with Rico kept replaying in his mind. Had he made the right choice? Or was he letting his quest for legitimacy blind him to necessary action? He needed distraction. Something to occupy his mind until dawn. His laptop sat open on the desk, still displaying the Victor Hale files from days ago. Most of it he'd memorized, the fraud, the bribes, the safety violations. But there was one folder he hadn't fully explored.
Background. Personal history.
Dominic clicked it open. Birth certificate. School records. Business licenses. The mundane paper trail of a life built on privilege and arrogance. Then he saw a file labeled Greenwood Towers Project, 2019. Something about the name tickled his memory. Greenwood.
He knew that name.
He opened the file. Construction project. Mixed-use development. Budget overruns. And then, buried in the middle, fatality report. Maria Isabella Torres. Age 24. Cause of death. Blunt force trauma from falling construction materials. Investigation closed. Accidental death. No criminal charges filed. Dominic's blood turned to ice. Maria Isabella Torres. His sister's name was Maria Leone, but she'd married young, against his wishes, to a man named Carlos Torres. Dominic had been in the middle of a war with a rival family and barely attended the wedding. They'd drifted apart. He'd been so consumed by the life, by building his empire, that he'd lost track of her. Until the call came. 6 years ago.
Maria was dead. Construction accident.
He'd flown to the funeral, numb with guilt. She was 24. A baby. Gone because of faulty scaffolding at some construction site. He'd wanted revenge then. Had his men investigate. But Carlos had begged him to let it go, said Maria wouldn't want more violence. Said the company had settled, paid compensation. And Dominic, drowning in federal investigations at the time, had reluctantly agreed. He'd never learned which company. With shaking hands, Dominic pulled up his sister's death certificate. Date of death, March 15, 2019. Location, Greenwood Towers construction site, downtown. The same site, the same date. Victor Hale's company had killed his sister. Dominic's vision blurred. He stood abruptly, the chair clattering backward. The whiskey glass fell, shattering on the hardwood floor. He didn't notice. 6 years. He'd been living in the same city as the man responsible for his sister's death and never knew. And then, by pure chance, that same man had thrown coffee in Sophie's face. The universe's cruelest joke. Dominic's hands trembled as he dug deeper into the files. There, inspection reports showing faulty scaffolding. Emails from site managers warning about safety concerns. And Hale's response. Keep costs down. I don't pay you to worry. 3 weeks later, Maria fell 3 stories when the scaffolding collapsed. The investigation had been cursory. Inspector James Morrison ruled it accidental within 48 hours. Dominic pulled Morrison's records. 3 months after Maria's death, he'd bought a new house.
Cash.
Well above his salary grade. Hale had paid him off. Dominic's chest constricted. He braced himself against the desk, gasping for air. Rage, grief, and guilt crashed over him in waves. His baby sister. The girl who used to climb on his back at family dinners. Who'd called him Dom Dom until she was 12. who died alone and afraid while he was too busy playing mob boss to protect her. And he'd let it go. Let the man responsible walk free because he was tired, because he was being investigated, because it was easier. The door creaked open. Sophie stood there in her nightgown, hair tousled, face still marked with healing burns.
Dumb.
I heard something break. She saw his face and rushed over. What's wrong? What happened? He couldn't speak, could only point at the screen. Sophie read, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh my God. This is your Maria? The sister you told me about? Dominic nodded, not trusting his voice. Victor Hale killed her. Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. He killed your sister, and then 6 years later, She looked down at her scarred face, understanding dawning. He hurt me. The same man. I could have stopped him, Dominic's voice cracked. 6 years ago, I could have ended him. But I was weak. I let him pay me off with blood money, and walked away. And because of that, because I did nothing, he was free to hurt you. No, Sophie grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. This is not your fault. You didn't know. I should have known. I should have investigated harder, pushed further, made him pay for what he did to Maria. His voice rose. Instead, I took the easy path. Told myself I was choosing peace. And my sister's murderer walked free for 6 more years, hurting God knows how many other people, until he hurt the only other person His voice broke completely. Sophie pulled him into her arms. Dominic collapsed against her, 30 years of carefully maintained control shattering. He sobbed, raw, gasping sounds that came from somewhere deep and buried. He killed her, Sophie. He killed my baby sister because he wanted to save money. Because her life meant nothing to him. Just like yours meant nothing when he burned you. Dominic pulled back, his eyes red. I stopped Rico tonight. Told him we don't solve problems with violence anymore. That we're better than that. But standing here, knowing what I know now. Don't, Sophie's voice was firm. Don't you dare finish that sentence. He deserves to die. Maybe.
Probably.
But you don't deserve to become a murderer again. She wiped his tears with her thumbs. Your sister, Maria. What was she like? The question derailed him. What? Tell me about her. Not how she died. How she lived. Dominic's throat tightened. She was
light.
Even growing up in our neighborhood, with our father, with all the darkness, she stayed bright. Wanted to be a teacher. Used to tutor kids in the building for free. He smiled despite the pain. She hated what I did. Told me I was smart enough to be anything, so why choose violence? She sounds like she was wise. She was better than all of us, Dominic's voice dropped. And I failed her. You were human. Flawed and overwhelmed and dealing with your own demons, Sophie took his hands. But you're not that man anymore. You've spent 3 years trying to be the person Maria wanted you to be. Don't throw that away now. How can I let him live? Knowing what he took from me? From the world. You're not letting him live. The courts are handling it. Real courts, real justice. She squeezed his hands. And if they fail, if he somehow walks free, then we'll find another way. But we'll do it together, legally, without becoming the monsters he is. Dominic wanted to argue. Wanted to call Rico back, to unleash everything he'd held in check. 1 bullet. That's all it would take. Justice for Maria. Revenge for Sophie. But he looked at his wife, her scarred face, her steady eyes, her unwavering faith in who he was trying to become, and felt something shift. If I touch him now, he whispered, I lose everything. My family, my future, Maria's memory, and yourself, Sophie added softly. The self you've worked so hard to build. Dominic pulled her close again, breathing in her scent, grounding himself. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this. You are. You already proved it tonight with Rico. They stood there in the broken glass and spilled whiskey, 2 wounded people holding each other against the weight of the past. Finally, Dominic straightened. He closed the laptop, shutting away his sister's file. I need to tell Carlos. Maria's husband. He deserves to know. Tomorrow, Sophie said. Tonight, you need to rest. I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I'll see her falling. Then I'll stay with you until you can. She led him to the couch, pulling him down beside her. We'll watch the sunrise together. And tomorrow, we'll figure out how to move forward. Dominic laid his head in her lap, exhausted and hollow. Sophie stroked his hair, humming softly, some melody he didn't recognize but found comforting anyway. As dawn broke over the city, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Dominic made a decision. He wouldn't kill Victor Hale, but he'd make sure the man spent the rest of his life paying for every crime, every life destroyed, every person he'd treated as disposable. Not with bullets. With truth. Maria deserved that much. And this time, he wouldn't fail her. Victor Hale woke up in a hotel room that cost less per night than his morning coffee used to. His penthouse had been seized 3 days ago, collateral against unpaid loans. His cars repossessed. His bank accounts frozen pending investigation. 5 days since his arrest. 5 days that felt like 5 years. He checked his phone. 17 missed calls from creditors. 43 from reporters. And 1 text from his lawyer. Board voted you out. Unanimous.
I'm sorry.
Hale Development Corporation no longer belonged to Victor Hale. He threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the stained carpet, screen cracked. Like everything else in his life. The morning news played on the ancient TV. His face filled the screen, not the polished corporate headshot he'd carefully curated, but a mugshot. Disheveled. Defeated. Under the headline, Disgraced Mogul Faces Multiple Charges, the anchor's voice droned on. Additional charges filed today, including manslaughter in the 2019 death of Maria Torres at the Greenwood Towers construction site. Prosecutors allege Hale knowingly ignored safety violations and bribed inspectors to cover up. Victor turned it off. Maria Torres. He barely remembered her. Just another name on an incident report, another problem solved with cash and connections. How many had there been over the years? How many corners cut? How many lives deemed expendable in pursuit of profit? He'd never bothered counting. Now, they were counting for him. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten in 12 hours. His credit cards were maxed, his cash gone to lawyers. The $50 million bail had cleaned out what liquid assets remained, posted by attorneys who now wouldn't return his calls. Victor stumbled to the bathroom, catching his reflection. When had he gotten so old? The lines around his eyes, the gray in his stubble, the hollow look of a man watching his empire burn. This was Dominic Leone's doing. Had to be. That phone call, calm, controlled, promising destruction without violence. The man had been true to his word.
No bullets.
Just systematic annihilation. And Victor had no way to fight back. He dressed in the same clothes from yesterday, his last suit, now wrinkled and stained. His Rolex was gone, sold to pay for this hotel room. Everything else of value had been seized or liquidated. He needed help. Money. Someone who still had leverage over Leone. But who? Every connection had evaporated the moment his stock crashed. Senators stopped answering calls. Business partners claimed they barely knew him. Even his mistress had blocked his number. There was only one person left. The one who'd started this whole nightmare. Sophie Leone. Victor's hands shook as the plan formed. If he could reach her, apologize, maybe she'd convince her husband to back off. She'd seemed kind. Forgiving. The type who believed in second chances. He had to try. Rosewood Cafe looked exactly the same, as if the world hadn't shifted on its axis. Victor sat in his rental car, a beat-up Honda that cost him the last of his cash, watching the breakfast rush through the window.
There.
Sophie, carrying plates, smiling at customers. The bandages were gone now, replaced by makeup that couldn't quite hide the scarring on her cheek. His handiwork. His shame. Victor waited until she stepped outside for her break, lighting a cigarette by the dumpster. He approached slowly, hands raised. Mrs. Leone? Sophie. She spun around, cigarette dropping. What are you doing here? Please, I just need to talk. Get away from me. Her hand moved to her pocket.
Phone.
I'm calling the police.
Wait. Please.
Victor's voice cracked. I know I have no right to ask anything from you. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I'm begging you, call off your husband. Sophie's expression hardened. Call him off. He's destroying me. My company, my assets, my entire life. I've lost everything. Victor's voice rose desperately. I'll pay anything. Medical bills, therapy, a settlement. Just tell him to stop. Please. You think this is about money? Sophie's laugh was sharp and bitter. You think you can buy your way out of consequences like you've done your entire life? I made a mistake. You threw scalding coffee in my face because I spilled 3 drops on your shirt. Sophie stepped closer, her voice shaking with rage. You looked at me, a human being, and decided my pain didn't matter. That I was nothing. Just collateral damage in your important day. I know, and I'm sorry. You're sorry you got caught. Sorry that for once, there was someone who wouldn't let you get away with it. She crossed her arms. Do you even remember Maria Torres? Victor's face went white. What? The woman who died at your construction site in 2019. Do you remember her name before I said it? That was an accident. I was cleared. You were bought off the inspectors. Cut corners to save money. And when someone died because of it, you paid to make the problem disappear. Sophie's eyes blazed. Maria Torres was 24 years old. She was going to be a teacher. And she was my husband's sister. The ground seemed to drop away beneath Victor's feet. I didn't know. Of course you didn't know. You never bothered to learn the names of the people you destroyed. They were just numbers on a balance sheet. Sophie's voice dropped to something cold. My husband could have killed you. His men wanted to.
Part of him still wants to.
But he chose not to because he's trying to be better than what he was. Better than men like you. Then tell him it worked. I've lost everything. Isn't that enough? Enough. Sophie laughed again, hollow. You want to know what's enough? Justice. Real justice. You're going to stand trial for fraud, for bribery, for manslaughter. You're going to face every person you've hurt. And then you're going to prison, where you can't buy your way out, where you can't throw hot coffee in someone's face and walk away. I'll die in there. I'm 48 years old. Maria was 24. She didn't get to live long enough to have a career, a family, a future. But you want sympathy because you might spend your golden years in a cell? Sophie's voice went quiet. Get away from my cafe. And if you ever come near me or my family again, I'll make sure Dominic forgets all about being legitimate. Victor staggered backward. You're just like him. Just like all of them. No, Sophie said firmly. I'm nothing like you. I believe in justice. In consequences. In treating people like they matter. You're only facing punishment now because someone finally stood up to you. That's not revenge. That's accountability. She turned and walked back inside, leaving Victor standing by the dumpster, truly alone for the first time in his life. He slumped against the brick wall, sliding down until he sat on the filthy concrete. Every avenue closed. Every hope extinguished. A homeless man shuffled past, pausing. You okay, buddy? Victor looked up at him, genuinely concerned despite having nothing. When had anyone looked at Victor with genuine concern? Not since his empire, his money, his power evaporated.
No, Victor whispered.
I'm not okay. The homeless man nodded sympathetically and kept walking. Victor sat there as the morning crowd passed by, people going to work, to breakfast, to lives that continued regardless of his downfall. He'd thought himself essential, untouchable, a pillar of the community. Now he was just another man who'd lost everything, forgotten before lunch. Inside the cafe, Sophie watched through the window. She felt no satisfaction.
No vindication.
Just exhaustion and sadness for all the pain that could have been avoided if one man had simply chosen kindness over cruelty. She pulled out her phone and texted Dominic. He came to the cafe. Begged me to call you off. I told him no. 3 dots appeared. Then, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Come home for dinner tonight. I love you. I love you too. And Sophie? I'm proud of you. She smiled, tucking the phone away. The scars on her face would fade eventually. The scars Victor had inflicted on himself would last forever. Sometimes the worst punishment was simply living with what you'd become. Victor Hale was learning that lesson now. And there were still more to come. Detective Marissa Cole spent 6 days building an airtight case against Dominic Leone. 6 days of surveillance footage, financial records, phone logs, and witness statements. She'd worked 18-hour days, driven by the certainty that no one, not even a reformed mob boss, could orchestrate this level of destruction without breaking laws. She was wrong. Now she sat across from Dominic on the rooftop of his building, the city sprawling beneath them in the amber glow of sunset. He'd suggested they meet here. Better view, he'd said. And no recording devices. Dominic poured 2 glasses of water from a pitcher, sliding one toward her. You've been busy, Detective. My security team says you've interviewed 43 people connected to me in the past week. 47, Marissa corrected.
I'm thorough.
I appreciate thoroughness. He leaned back in his chair, perfectly relaxed. What did you find? Marissa opened her briefcase, pulling out a thick folder. Phone records showing you contacted 15 journalists, 3 financial analysts, and 4 former Hale employees in the 72 hours after the cafe incident. Surveillance footage of Rico Alvarez meeting with known financial hackers. Testimonies from people who say members of your organization approached them with information about Victor Hale. Sounds incriminating. It would be. Except every journalist will testify you simply provided publicly available information and suggested they investigate further. The financial analysts say you asked standard due diligence questions. The former employees claim they came forward voluntarily after seeing the cafe video. She spread the documents across the table. And the hackers Rico met with? They never actually did anything. No systems breached. No data stolen. Dominic picked up one of the documents, scanning it. So, what's the problem? The problem is that I know you orchestrated Victor Hale's downfall. I know you used your connections and resources to systematically destroy him. And I know that somehow, impossibly, you managed to do it all legally. Is that a crime? It should be. Marissa's frustration leaked through. You wielded power like a weapon, Mr. Leone. You might not have pulled a trigger, but you executed that man's life just as surely as if you'd put a bullet in his head. Except he's still alive. Still has a chance at redemption if he chooses it. Dominic set the document down. I exposed a criminal, Detective. I made sure evidence of his crimes reached the proper authorities. Isn't that called being a good citizen? Don't play games with me. You know exactly what you did. I do. Dominic's expression shifted, becoming serious. I used every legal tool at my disposal to ensure a dangerous man faced consequences for his actions. I connected journalists with sources. I encouraged former victims to come forward. I made sure the truth, all of it, came to light. You had him investigated within hours of the incident. Wouldn't you? If someone attacked your spouse, wouldn't you want to know who they were? He leaned forward. I did my research.
And what I found horrified me.
Financial fraud, bribed officials, safety violations that killed workers. Victor Hale built an empire on suffering, and the system protected him because he had money and connections. So, you decided to be judge and jury?
No.
I decided to be a witness. I witnessed his crimes and made sure others witnessed them too. Dominic's voice hardened. The difference between us, Detective, is that I wasn't hamstrung by protocol and bureaucracy. I could move fast.
Connect dots.
Make noise until people had to listen. Marissa studied him. You found out about Maria Torres. Dominic's mask slipped for just a moment. Yes, your sister. The woman who died at Greenwood Towers. Marissa pulled out another file. I did my homework too. Maria Leone, married, named Torres. Killed in a construction accident that was covered up by bribed inspectors. You didn't know it was Hale's company until after you'd already started destroying him. A coincidence that made things complicated. Complicated? Marissa's voice rose. You discovered the man who assaulted your wife also killed your sister, and you still held back from having him killed? That's not complicated, Mr. Leone. That's remarkable restraint. Or proof that I've changed, Dominic met her eyes. You came here thinking you'd find evidence of criminal conspiracy. Instead, you found a man who used his resources to expose the truth. Tell me, detective, what would you have done in my position? I would have followed the law. Would you? If someone burned your wife's face, would you really sit back and hope the system, the same system that protected him for decades, would suddenly work? Dominic shook his head. I don't believe you. I think you'd do exactly what I did. You'd use every advantage, every connection, every tool to make sure justice happened. Marissa was quiet, because he was right, and she hated him for it. The leaked files, she said finally. The financial documents that started everything. Those came from somewhere. Anonymous whistleblowers. I'm told there's an entire network of them online. Whistleblowers you contacted. Journalists I spoke with contacted them. I merely suggested it would be worthwhile to investigate Hale Development Corporation's financial practices. Dominic smiled slightly. Is it illegal to suggest someone do their job? It's manipulation. It's free speech. He stood, walking to the rooftop edge. You want me to be guilty of something. I understand that. In your eyes, I'm a criminal who got lucky. But the truth is simpler. I'm a man who protected his family using the same system that failed them. I didn't break it. I just understood it better than Victor Hale did. Marissa gathered her documents, shoving them back into the briefcase. I still think what you did was wrong. You're entitled to that opinion. But I can't prove you committed any crimes. Because I didn't. Dominic turned back to her. Every action I took was legal. Every exposure was truthful. Every consequence was earned. I didn't ruin Victor Hale, detective. I just told the truth loud enough that his lies couldn't drown it out. Marissa stood, moving to the door. She paused at the threshold. What you told the truth about fraud, bribery, and manslaughter. But what about the other things? The intimidation, the fear, the message you sent to everyone in the city that crossing Dominic Leone, even legally, will end in destruction. Good, Dominic said quietly. Let them be afraid. Not of violence, but of consequences. Let them understand that power and money don't make you untouchable anymore. That there are people who won't look away when you hurt the innocent. That's vigilantism.
No.
Vigilantes break the law. I upheld it. He walked toward her. You came here hoping to arrest me, to prove that I'm still the criminal I used to be. But you found something that bothers you more, a man who understands the system well enough to use it as effectively as any weapon. If you do this again, if someone hurts my family again, I'll do exactly what I did this time. I'll investigate. I'll expose. I'll make sure the truth reaches people who can act on it. Dominic's voice dropped. But I won't kill. I won't threaten. I won't cross the line I've drawn for myself. Because my wife and daughter deserve better than a husband and father who solves problems with violence. Marissa searched his face for deception and found only conviction. Your daughter, Isabella. How's she taking all this? The question landed like a punch. Dominic's composure flickered.
She's processing.
Trying to understand who her father is. Make sure she understands the right lessons, Mr. Leone. Because kids who grow up watching their parents bend the rules, even legally, learn that power matters more than principle. Is that what you think I'm teaching her? I think you're teaching her that the world is divided into people with power and people without it. And that if you have power, you use it. Marissa opened the door. That's not necessarily wrong, but it's dangerous. She left him standing on the rooftop, silhouetted against the dying light. Back in her car, Marissa sat for a long moment before starting the engine. She pulled out her phone, looking at the case file one more time. Everything legal. Everything justified. Everything terrifying. She typed a message to her lieutenant. Leone investigation closed. No criminal activity found. Recommend continued monitoring, but no charges. Her finger hovered over send. Then she added, subject demonstrated remarkable restraint given circumstances. May actually be reformed. She deleted the last sentence.
Sent the message.
Started the car. As she drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror at the building shrinking behind her. Somewhere up there, Dominic Leone stood at the edge of his empire. 1 foot in the world he'd left behind, 1 foot in the future he was trying to build. Marissa didn't know which way he'd ultimately fall. She just hoped she wouldn't have to be the one to catch him. Or stop him. The courthouse steps were packed with reporters, cameras, and protesters holding signs. Justice for Maria, Workers' Lives Matter, #Justice for Sophie. What had started as one viral video had grown into something larger, a movement against corporate impunity, against the powerful who treated ordinary people as disposable. Sophie stood at the edge of the crowd, wearing a simple navy dress, her scarred face visible without makeup for the first time in weeks. She'd spent 2 hours that morning deciding whether to hide it or own it. Dominic had kissed her forehead and said, "Show them what courage looks like." So here she was, scarred and standing tall. The courthouse doors opened. Victor Hale emerged in handcuffs, flanked by marshals. His expensive suit hung loose on his frame. He'd lost weight in county jail. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something hollow and broken. The crowd erupted.
Shouts. Camera flashes.
Questions hurled like accusations. "Mr. Hale, do you have anything to say to Maria Torres's family? What about the other workers who died in your buildings? Do you regret throwing coffee in Sophie Leone's face?" Victor kept his head down, shuffling toward the transport van. But then he saw her. Sophie, standing in the crowd, watching him with calm, unwavering eyes.
He stopped.
The marshals tried to move him along, but he planted his feet. "Mrs. Leone," he called out, his voice cracking.
"I'm sorry."
"For what I did. For all of it."
"I'm sorry."
The crowd went silent, waiting for her response. Sophie stepped forward, close enough that only Victor and the nearest reporters could hear. "Sorry doesn't undo what you did. It doesn't bring back Maria Torres or heal my face or restore the lives you destroyed. But it's a start." She paused. "I hope you use your time in prison to become someone who actually means it." Victor's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how." Then learned Sophie's voice was firm but not cruel. "Because when you get out, if you get out, the world doesn't need another Victor Hale. It needs someone better." The marshals led him away. The crowd surged forward with more questions, but Sophie turned and walked to a podium that had been set up at the base of the courthouse steps. Her hands shook as she gripped the edges, looking out at the sea of faces and cameras. Public speaking terrified her. But some things were more important than fear. "My name is Sophie Leone," she began, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. 3 weeks ago, a man threw hot coffee in my face because I accidentally spilled a few drops on his shirt. That video went viral. Millions of people saw it. And I'm grateful they did. Not for the attention, but because it started a conversation we desperately need to have. The crowd quieted, listening. We live in a world where people are treated differently based on their wealth, their status, their perceived importance. Where a waitress can be assaulted in public, and the first instinct of many is to ask what she did wrong. Where workers die in unsafe conditions, and their deaths are called accidents to protect the profits of the powerful. Sophie's voice grew stronger. "Victor Hale hurt me, but he hurt so many others first. Maria Torres, who died because safety equipment cost too much. The families evicted from their homes to make room for luxury developments. The contractors cheated out of payment. The employees harassed and discarded. I was just the first one with a camera pointed at me." A woman in the crowd shouted, "Tell them, Sophie. Kindness should never be seen as weakness." Sophie continued, her eyes bright with emotion. "Service work is not lesser work. And no one should need power or connections or a husband in the shadows to be treated with basic human respect." Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled notes. Sophie saw people in the crowd wiping tears. Victor Hale is facing justice today. Real justice, through the courts, through the system we all have to believe in. But this can't end with one man's trial. We have to change the culture that created him, that told him ordinary people don't matter, that their pain is acceptable collateral damage for his convenience. She pulled out a sheet of paper, hands still shaking. That's why I'm announcing the Leone Foundation for Workers' Rights. It will provide legal support for workers facing unsafe conditions, help families of those killed in workplace incidents, and advocate for stronger protections for service workers everywhere. The crowd erupted in applause. Sophie held up her hand. This foundation is funded anonymously by people who believe that power should be used to protect the vulnerable, not exploit them. It will operate transparently, work within the law, and fight for a world where what happened to Maria Torres, and to me, becomes impossible. More applause. Shouts of support. To everyone watching, if you've been hurt, dismissed, treated as less than human because of your job or your bank account or your lack of connections, your story matters. Your pain matters. You matter. And we're going to make sure the world remembers that. Sophie stepped back from the podium, overwhelmed. Reporters surged forward with questions, but someone else took her place at the microphone. Carlos Torres, Maria's widower. My wife died because a rich man decided her life was worth less than his profit margin, Carlos said, his voice thick with emotion. For 6 years, I stayed silent because I didn't think anyone would listen, because I thought that's just how the world works. But Sophie showed me something different. She showed me that speaking up matters, that standing up matters, that we don't have to accept cruelty as inevitable. In the crowd, Dominic stood with Isabella, watching his wife transform pain into purpose. His daughter slipped her hand into his, squeezing tight. "Mom's amazing," Isabella whispered. "She always has been," Dominic replied, his voice rough with pride. "I just helped make sure people were paying attention." "Is that what you do now? Make sure people pay attention?" Dominic looked down at his daughter, 17, brilliant, seeing through him with uncomfortable clarity. "I'm trying to figure that out. I used to think power was about control, about making people afraid to cross you. But your mother's teaching me something different." "What's that?" "That real power is using your voice when everyone expects you to stay silent. It's choosing kindness even after cruelty. It's turning pain into something that protects others." He watched Sophie embrace Carlos, both of them crying. "She's stronger than I ever was." Isabella leaned against him. "I'm still mad at you. For what you did to Hale. For using your old connections. I know. But I'm also proud. Because you could have killed him. Everyone expected you to. And you chose not to." Dominic's throat tightened. "I chose not to because of you and your mother. Because you deserve better than a father who solves problems with violence. Do you think you can really change? Actually become who you're trying to be?" "I don't know," Dominic admitted. "But I'm going to keep trying. Even when it's hard. Even when every instinct tells me to go back to the old ways." They watched Sophie finish her interviews, her face glowing despite the scars, transformed from victim to advocate in the span of 3 weeks. On the courthouse steps, Victor Hale had been loaded into the transport van. Through the wire mesh window, he watched Sophie commanding the crowd's attention, using her pain to protect others. He'd thought burning her face would be the end of a minor inconvenience. Instead, it had been the beginning of his downfall and her rise. The van pulled away, carrying him toward a future of trials and testimony and years in prison. As the courthouse faded from view, Victor finally understood what he'd lost. Not his money or his company or his freedom, but his humanity, his chance to matter for something good. Sophie Leone had taken the worst moment of her life and transformed it into hope for thousands. Victor Hale had spent his entire life taking and destroying. In the end, only one of them would be remembered. And it wouldn't be him. 3 months later, the Leone Foundation Gala filled a downtown ballroom with 500 guests. Business leaders, politicians, activists, and ordinary workers who'd benefited from the foundation's legal aid mingled under crystal chandeliers. Sophie had insisted on keeping it accessible. Tickets started at $20, not $2,000. "This feels surreal," Sophie whispered to Dominic as they stood at the entrance, greeting arrivals. Her scars had faded to thin silver lines that caught the light when she smiled. She no longer hid them. "You did this," Dominic said, adjusting his tie. "All I did was write some checks." "Anonymous checks," she reminded him. "From your retired accounts." "Blood money," some would call it. His expression darkened momentarily. "Might as well use it for something good." Sophie squeezed his hand. "It's not blood money anymore. You earned it legitimately for 3 years before this. And now it's helping people. That's redemption, Dom." Before he could respond, Isabella appeared, stunning in a navy gown that matched her mother's. She'd come home from her first semester at Columbia for this event, trading studying for speechwriting. "Mom, they're ready for you." Isabella held up note cards. "I revised the ending like you asked." "You nervous?" Sophie asked her daughter. "Terrified. Public speaking is genetic. I got your anxiety and Dad's intensity. Worst combination possible," but Isabella smiled. "Though watching you own that courthouse speech helped. If you can do it with your face still healing, I can manage talking about scholarship programs." The three of them moved through the crowd. Dominic noticed the stares, some admiring, some wary. The Leone name still carried weight, just different now. People approached cautiously, unsure whether to acknowledge his past or pretend it didn't exist. Rico Alvarez stood near the bar, looking uncomfortable in his tuxedo. He'd taken Dominic's advice and spent 2 months in Florida with his sister. When he returned, he'd asked for a legitimate role in Leone Enterprises, something that didn't involve backroom deals or threats. Now he managed their community investment fund, directing money towards small businesses in struggling neighborhoods. "Boss," Rico nodded as Dominic approached. "Hell of a turnout. Sophie's doing. She's better at this than I ever was. She's got the touch, that's for sure." Rico sipped his drink. "Tommy and Vincent are here too. They brought their families. First time some of their kids have seen them in anything other than work clothes." Dominic scanned the room, spotting his former enforcers laughing with their wives and children. Men who'd once collected debts and delivered threats now worked in legitimate businesses, trying to build different lives. "You think we can actually pull this off?" Rico asked quietly. "This whole reformed criminal thing?" "I don't know," Dominic admitted. "Some days I wake up and the old instincts are still there. Someone cuts me off in traffic, and I think about license plates and home addresses. Then I remember who I'm trying to be. For them?" Rico nodded towards Sophie and Isabella. "For me too. Turns out living without constant paranoia is nice." Dominic set down his untouched champagne. "You settling in okay?" "Getting there. It's weird, you know? Actually helping people instead of scaring them. But I sleep better." Rico's voice dropped. "I heard Hale got 17 years. Won't be eligible for parole for 12-inch. Good. You ever think about—" "No." Dominic cut him off. "Whatever you're about to ask, no. It's done. He's facing consequences. That's enough."
Rico nodded. "Yeah."
"You're right," he paused. "Your sister would be proud, I think, of what Sophie's doing. The foundation named that scholarship after Maria." Dominic's throat tightened. "I know." The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage where Sophie stood at the podium, radiant and nervous. The room quieted. "Thank you all for coming," Sophie began. 3 months ago, I was just a waitress trying to get through another shift. Then something terrible happened, followed by something unexpected. People cared. Not because of who I'm married to or who I knew, but because what happened to me could happen to anyone. And it has happened to too many people." She clicked a remote. Images appeared on screens around the room, workers, families, faces of people the foundation had helped. These are the people the Leone Foundation exists for. Maria Torres, who died at 24. James Chun, who lost 3 fingers in an industrial accident and couldn't afford lawyers. Sandra Williams, a single mother evicted with 6 hours' notice. Every person here has a story. Every story matters. The crowd applauded. Sophie continued, detailing the foundation's work: legal aid, safety advocacy, emergency funds for workers facing retaliation. Then she stepped aside. I'd like to introduce someone special. My daughter, Isabella Leone, who'll be managing our scholarship program while completing her degree in social justice at Columbia. Isabella took the stage, poised despite her earlier nervousness. When my dad was young, he thought power meant making people afraid. When my mom was young, she thought survival meant staying invisible. I'm lucky. I get to grow up learning from both their mistakes and their growth. Dominic felt his eyes burn. Sophie reached for his hand. The Maria Torres Memorial Scholarship, Isabella continued, will fund college education for children who've lost parents to workplace negligence. Because knowledge is power. Real power. The kind that changes systems instead of just surviving them. More applause. Isabella outlined the program: full tuition, living expenses, mentorship. 20 scholarships this year, funded entirely by anonymous donors. After the speeches, guests mingled. Sophie was surrounded by people, workers sharing stories, activists proposing partnerships, journalists requesting interviews. She'd found her calling. Dominic slipped outside onto the terrace, needing air. The city sprawled below, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. He pulled out his phone, scrolling to a photo of Maria from 15 years ago, young, bright, alive. "I'm sorry I failed you," he whispered. "But I'm trying to make it mean something." The terrace door opened. Sophie joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Decaf," she said with a slight smile. Figured we'd both had enough excitement with caffeine. He laughed despite himself. "Too soon?" "Maybe." She handed him a cup, standing beside him at the railing. "You okay?"
Yeah.
Just thinking about how different things could have been. If I'd investigated harder 6 years ago. If I'd protected Maria. If I'd been the person I am now back then. You can't undo the past, Dom. None of us can. We can only build better futures. She sipped her coffee. And look what you've built. A foundation that'll help thousands. A daughter who believes in justice without violence. A life that actually means something beyond fear and control. We built it. You and Isabella. I just provided the resources. You provided more than that. You chose restraint when everything in you screamed for revenge. You showed Isabella that change is possible. That who you are doesn't have to be who you are." Sophie leaned against him. "That matters more than any amount of money." Through the glass, they watched Isabella talking animatedly with Carlos Torres, both of them laughing. New family, forged from tragedy. "She's not ashamed anymore," Dominic said quietly. "Isabella. I can see it in how she looks at me now. She never was. She was scared." "There's a difference." Sophie looked up at him. "And now she sees her father chose the hard road. That's not shameful. That's heroic." "I'm not a hero. You're mine." She kissed his cheek. "And that's enough." The terrace door burst open again. Isabella poked her head out.
Mom.
"They want you back inside. Someone from the governor's office wants to talk about statewide worker protection legislation." Sophie's eyes widened. "Seriously? Seriously. You're kind of a big deal now." As Sophie hurried inside, Dominic lingered a moment longer. The city glowed beneath him. Millions of lives, millions of stories. He'd spent decades trying to control it through fear. Now he was learning to change it through hope. His phone buzzed. A news alert. Victor Hale sentenced to 17 years in federal prison. Judge cites callous disregard for human life. Dominic read it twice, then deleted the notification. Justice served. Not hot like coffee.
Cold and measured like it should be.
He drained his cup and went back inside. The party would go late. Tomorrow, Sophie had 3 interviews scheduled. Next week, Isabella would return to school with stories about her mother, the advocate. And Dominic? He'd keep writing checks, making calls, using power the way it should be used, to lift up instead of tear down. The old Dominic Leone had ruled through fear. The new Dominic Leone was learning to lead through love. It was harder.
Slower.
Less satisfying than simple violence. But watching Sophie command a room, watching Isabella speak with passion, watching former criminals become mentors and protectors. This was the empire worth building. One good deed at a time. One choice at a time. One life saved at a time. The coffee that had burned Sophie's face had ultimately ignited something better. Not revenge, not destruction, but transformation. And that, Dominic thought as he rejoined his family, was the only victory that actually mattered. The end.